Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2024 week 3, that's January 15th to January 21st. And we are right back on wiring some stuff in the front end. So what I'm doing here is I am just opening up a package that I got from Almar. It's got some new light sockets, it's got a bunch of bulbs, it's got all the stuff that's gonna help us make all the lighting on the front end work. So, you may be wondering to yourself, why did I buy new sockets? Well, I'm a bit of an idiot, and these are the actual 79 to 86 sockets. The other ones I had were 87 to 93. They technically work, but they take up a bit more space. So, I figured what the hell, I was ordering a bunch of stuff from Almar anyways. I'll just order up some new proper year sockets, and then I can have the other ones as spares. And as it turns out, I might actually use them as reverse light sockets just because I can't find reverse lights. But what we're going to do is we are going to put new Deutsch pins on this terminal and just reuse the existing 3-pin connector that I was using. Now that the passenger side is done, we're just going to do the exact same thing on the driver's side. Put this socket on, put the pins on, and plug some bulbs into it. While we're here, we're also going to put the other end on the side marker and plug that in, put an LED light in there. So what my plan is now is to plug the new LED headlights into the sockets on both sides, and we're gonna test the lights out. With all the sockets on, I see no reason why we shouldn't be testing this to make sure it all works, make sure I got all the wiring right, make sure, you know, nothing blows up or catches on fire. Alright, so we're just walking to the back of the car, turn the power on, and pull the light switch out, and got nothing. And that's because none of the ignition wires are connected, and none of the column wires are connected, so none of the, you know, turn signal, none of that was connected, so yeah, the lights definitely don't work if none of that is connected. And if I recall correctly, the headlight switch was also disconnected. So all around bad way to try and get headlights working. But here we go. Now with that all reconnected, we can pull it out and we can see that we've got lights. That is awesome. Pull it out. We're getting headlights. That's so good. You know, turn the turn signals on. But we run into a problem when we turn the left turn signal on. Yes, the light's flashing, but if I recall correctly, the high beams or the headlights were also flashing. Right turn is just fine, but left turn is not good. See, when I turn the left turn on, the left turn light is flashing, and the headlight on the far side is flashing. So that's not good. So that means we need to start doing some troubleshooting in a bad way because, yeah, the left turn signal is not working as I would expect. All right, so we are going to start troubleshooting. What I know is that the power to the high beams comes out of the headlight switch. It goes into the steering column. And then from there, when you pull the high beam switch, the switch changes the power, outputs to the high beam or the low beam, as well as power for the turn signals go into there and leave from there. So what I'm doing is I'm checking to make sure that I've got the right, that the power coming out of the headlight switch is going to the right pin on the input harness, and I mean, I think it is. So that's working. And then what I do is I'm going to check the output of the harness there and check my pinout on the firewall connector and make sure I didn't like pin it out wrong or something like that. And that all checks out. The high beam talks to the high beam, the left turn to the left turn. So now what I'm doing is I am grabbing a ground and I'm just checking for power at the back of the headlight switch with it plugged in. So when I plug it in, I am expecting when I pull the headlight switch out to have 12 volts on the headlight socket, but that's not the case. But when I pull the headlight socket out, I actually get 12 volts to the left turn bulb. So what I'm doing is that's the old connector that came originally in the car with the wires chopped off. I labeled them all out. So I'm comparing the labels that I pinned out to the connector on the column. And what I realized is I got the headlight output and the left turn output reversed. So super simple fix. Pull it out, pull the pins out, flip those around, and we should be good to go. So I'm fairly confident that when I was pulling one of the wires out, it actually ripped out of the connector. So I had to go grab a new one, and I will repin the wire with a new terminal and hopefully make it a little bit tighter and make it so it doesn't go anywhere this time. Alright, with that repinned and moved around, plugged back in, it is time for the moment of truth. Clearance lights work, headlights work, do the turn signals work? Yes, the turn signals are in fact working as they should. So, everything on the front end of the car now working exactly like it should. I just had those 2 wires backwards. A little bit of troubleshooting, got it sorted out, no stress. So what I'm doing right now is I'm throwing an amp clamp on the wires because I want to calculate, or I want to find out how much amperage the low beams, high beams, turn signal, clearance lights all draw. And the reason for that is I'm using an 18 gauge wire for the ground. And alright, so what I'm doing now that I've got everything tested is I'm putting all the bulbs away, I'm putting the lights away because I don't want them just hanging around to get broken. They're fairly expensive. And what do you know, when I started pulling the high beam off, one of the wires pulled out of the terminals. These terminals are for fairly large wires, and the single high beam wire is pretty small, so I got to be much better when I crimp it. Yeah, I'll just quickly recrimp it, put it in, and you know, I give it a tug test, and it's actually in there pretty good now, so I'm not too worried about it. What I could also do, if I'm really worried, is add a little bit of heat shrink onto the connectors, and that will ensure that it's going nowhere. So I might still do that. I'm not entirely sure yet. All right, with that, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup. Alright, so I'm bringing all the tools over to the back of the car, and the reason for that is because I need to do the same thing that I just did in the front in the back. So I'm going to run ground wires for each light. My original plan was I was going to run a 16 gauge wire up to kind of a midpoint and then split it off into grounds to the rest. But I ended up changing that midway because trying to get in there for a crimp was going to be crappy, and you know, why am I dicking around with using an extra, you know, like 8 feet of 18 gauge wire? Like, it just run wires to every socket and device and then just run them all down. So yeah, so I do that, and then I just kind of continue with wiring on this like I normally do, tape it every so often, run it out to its points. Yeah, I don't think I got much more to say other than enjoy. So now that all of the wiring on the back end is done, we can do some testing. So all right, we got clearance lights, we've got left turn signal, we've got right turn signal. That is freaking awesome. Now I'm just going to quickly strip the brake wires because I still haven't wired the brake switch, but we are going to activate the brake light. So we have brake light and turn signal, and I think we're going to quickly check if we have the other brake light and turn signal, and we do. So here I turn off the clearance lights, and I'm wondering what the hell just happened. But yeah, I turned off the clearance light. That's why the turn signal was only left. Check the hazards. Hazards work. So the lights on this car are fully wired. I can't check the reverse lights yet because I don't have the bulbs for them. I didn't order them, but that's fine. Those lights are done, so we are going to move back to exhaust. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start working on fitting up the driver side exhausts. We're going to do the same thing as the passenger side, come out of the muffler, up and over the axle, and then we'll, go between the spring and the fuel cell, and then we'll figure something out for the full back end later. So what I just got in that case is a new tool, and it's a tubing expander. So you kind of put it in the tube, you crank down on the bolt, piece expands, and then the tube should expand. So what happens is when I'm cutting the tube at a slight angle, the radius on that tube is going to be larger than on a tube that's cut straight across. So that's it's a 3-inch diameter pipe, if I recall correctly. But when you cut it on an angle, that diameter probably changes to 3 1/4, or depending on how aggressive your cut is, you could probably open that up to like 4 inches. I wouldn't try to mate up something that aggressive, but for the smaller ones, I'm just going to expand this tube out a little bit, and what that's going to do is make it so that my weld is a lot closer. I don't have super large gaps to fill. I don't have to kind of beat the metal to be smaller. Like, it's just going to make it a lot nicer. So now that the pipes are fitting up a lot better, we're going to tack them into place and just kind of get them going like we did with the other side. So we're going to take a quick break. I just got some parts in from LMR. This is a drive shaft safety loop. So what happens is there's a piece that goes up into the trans tunnel, and there's a piece that bolts across into the floor. So if the front drive shaft breaks, the drive shaft doesn't drop and fall to the ground and, you know, potentially catapult your car, or, you know, just spin around and, you know, break a lot of shit. So I'm just roughly getting this into place, just kind of checking it out to make sure it's going to do what we need it to do, and it will. Since we've test fit that, we don't need to worry about it too much. I'll permanently install it later. But what I do want to do is get this brake line done. So it's been sitting here waiting to get it, you know, an end put on it for a long time. I've just been putting it off for no real reason other than I don't know why. So now it's just time to get stuff done. You know, I made my list and I need to check stuff off that list to get this car ready to go. Get it on the road, get it running again. That's the main goal. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be running and on the road. So we're going to undo all of the brake line holders, just unscrew them, and we'll pull the brake line out. We'll take it up to the bench. We'll cut it down to length. We'll put an end on it, and then we'll put it back in the car. So now that that's done, I'm gonna kind of quickly put this exhaust back together, because I realized at some point I was like, shit, I took the stabilizer or the brace links off of the rear end at some point in time when I was doing some work. It's like, shit, is the exhaust gonna clear those? So we're just gonna throw the exhaust roughly up into place, and then we're gonna grab one of those links and see. And sure as shit, the exhaust goes directly in the way, and that's not good. Now, fortunately for me, I got a couple of things going in my favor. First off, the rear end is built up enough right now with the main cross brace on the bottom of it that for the power that I'm going to be running in the short term, I don't really think I need those forward bars. Those are going to help with, you know, the tubes pulling forward. I don't think I'm going to really run into that. So, and I also know I'm probably going to redo this exhaust in 2.5 inch at some point in time. So having those in right now, not a big deal. I'll survive. All right, so here I am writing out my list. I got ahead of myself earlier when I said I've written out my list. I'm going to start checking things off. Here's my list. I'm writing this out right now, all the things I got to do on this car to kind of get it up and running. Well, on the road. Alright, as you saw, it's like 2.5 pages of stuff I gotta do. So we're gonna do a tiny little bit of cleanup, just kind of get access to the rear end here, because we're gonna start checking off items from that list. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to install wheel seals on the axles. So when I put this whole thing together, I never put the wheel seals in because I was like, I'll probably have to pull this back apart, put it back together, pull it apart, put it back together. So I left the wheel seals out. Well, it's time to start checking things off, and one of those things on the checklist is putting the wheel seals on. Super easy to do. So what that involves is we're gonna jack up the rear end, get it off of those wheel cribs. We're gonna put jacks under the rear frame, and then, you know, we can drop the axle down. The main thing is I need the tires in the air. So what I have to do is I need to pull the wheels off. I need to pull the brake caliper off, pull the rotor off, pull the park brake off, pull the back plate off, and then slide the axle all the way out. When I slide the axle all the way out, I will then be able to slide the wheel seal over the axle and then onto the actual bearing. So yeah, undo everything that I've done in this rear, just put the seals in. So as I'm putting this back plate back together, I see that there's some holes for some Allen set screws, and I vaguely recall something about the set screws, so I'm just looking up the instructions to see what I'm supposed to be doing with those. Reading through the instructions, these don't have anything on it, so what I end up doing is I go through my box of parts that still need to be installed or are kind of relevant for the car, and I find the set screws and the instructions. And in the instructions, it says the bearing is going to protrude from the axle housing a bit, which it is. And if there is greater than, I think, 150 thousandths clearance, or if the bearing is protruding, less than 150 thousandths, you need to put these set screws in order to take up the slack. So what I do is I get my calipers out, I pull the back plate back off, I pull the axle out, I measure the thickness of the bearing, and then I measure the depth. Or actually, here I try and do this a terrible way, which is just kind of eyeballing it and measuring the gap. And then, putting the back plate on, and I'm like, Ben, just do this right. Like, you already got it apart, do it the right way. So I tried half-assing it, and then I'm like, no, do it the right way. So the right way is I end up pulling the axle out, I measure the thickness of that bearing, I write it down, I take my caliper, I measure the depth of the cavity that the bearing sits in, and then I subtract the thickness of the bearing from the depth of the cavity, and I get my measurement. And I think I'm so close to 150 thou that I'm not even stressed about it. I don't need to put those set screws in to take up any space. I can just put the axle in, put the back plate on, and away we go. we are just going to duplicate the process on the other side. But on the other side, I ran into a problem. So as I'm spinning this bearing on the axle, it's feeling very gritty. And I look at it and I start seeing these black flakes in the grease and in the bearing. And I'm like, fuck, this is not good. Like if I run this bearing and there's a ton of debris in there, you know, it's possibly going to just eat up the bearing instantly. And then, you know, that's not a good thing. So I'm going to spend some time. I'm going to spin this around. I'm going to clean out the grease as much as I can. I'm going to kind of clean out the black metal flakes as much as I can as I'm rotating this and as I see them. And then I'm going to put a little bit of axle oil in there just to, you know, try and flush it out more, spin it more, try and make sure I've got all the garbage out of it. And I think I do a pretty darn good job cleaning it for, you know, considering it's a sealed bearing. And I hope it doesn't eat itself alive. All right, with the axle seals done, it is now time to actually work on finishing up the rear end. So I just had this cover loosely installed. There's no fluid in it. And so what I'm gonna do, pull the cover off, and all I need to do is put the gasket in and then torque all of the bolts down correctly. I forget what the torque setting is, but it's in the instructions that comes with it all. So I torque the cover down correctly, and then I torque the bearing retainers on the back of the cap down, and then torque the lock nuts down correctly. Pretty simple stuff. All right, before I torque all that stuff down, there are some additional pieces that come with the TrueTrack. So got those 4 pieces there: a snap ring, a plug, and then 2 spacers. So I'm reading the directions and trying to figure out exactly what I need in my application. And all I end up doing is installing the plug and the snap ring. The 2 spacers are only used if you have the stock C-clip axles, and I don't. I got 9-inch ends, so I don't need to worry about the axles pushing in or anything like that, or being spaced correctly. The bearing is what keeps the spacing. So I'm just going to go ahead and install the C-clip. All right, well, folks, as you've seen, I've just torqued everything down, and with that, that is all the time we have in this video. So as always, if you stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we'll catch you in the next one.